Okay. Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to the South Lyon Community School regular Board of Education meeting on July 20th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
Okay, I'm here. Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Tell.
Here.
Mr. Schwegler.
Here.
Mr. Dashner.
Here.
Mr. Kennedy.
Here.
And Ms. Hanshaw.
Here. We are all here. We have a quorum. So next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and
to
the
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we will now go into our fiscal organizational meeting. Item number 3 is bank depositories. Is that Stacy reads those, or does someone else? Oh, there we go.
I normally don't read these, but I can. We did remove 2 banks that we hadn't used in a long time, and we have no investments with. Other than that, these are all the previous banks that you guys have approved over the years to hold depository and assets in. 1 is the Bank of New York, 2 is Chemical Bank, 3 is Comerica Bank, 4 is Fifth Third Bank, Fifth Third Securities, 5 is Flagstar Bank, 6 is Huntington Bank, 7 is JP Morgan Chase Bank, JP Morgan Securities, 8 is Liquid Asset Funds, 9 is MBIA Michigan Class Investment Pool, 10 is PNC Bank, 11 is CIBC Bank, and 12 is Vibe Credit Union.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve these as our district-wide bank depositories?
I'll move that we approve the listed 12 financial institutions as our normal banking entities.
Thank you.
I'll support.
Moved by Mr. Clark, supported by Mr. Dashner. Any questions or comments on our bank depositories? Okay, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Hanshaw.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Mr. Tell.
Yes.
And Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 4 is the board law firms.
I'll cover that too. Acknowledge the law firms used by the board are Troon Law Firm, PC, and Lusk Albertson, PLC.
Okay, can we get a motion to approve the 2 law firms as our district-wide law firms?
I'll move to accept Troon Law Firm and Lusk Albertson as the law firms used by the district.
I will second.
Moved by Mr. Dashner, supported by Mr. Abate. Any questions or comments about our law firms? Okay, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
Okay, I vote yes. Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Hanshaw.
Yes.
And Mr. Tell.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 5, independent auditor. Can we get a motion to approve Plant Moran PLLC as our district independent auditor?
I'll move that we approve Plant Moran for our auditing firm, which we've used for decades.
I'll support.
Moved by Mr. Clark, supported by Mr. Kennedy. Any questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Hanshaw.
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
Mr. Tell.
Yes.
And Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 6, purchasing cooperatives. Can we get a motion to approve the cooperative bids and the contracts listing for public school districts available through Oakland Schools?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy, supported by Mr. Dashner. Any questions or comments regarding our purchasing cooperatives? Okay, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Sanchow,
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy,
Yes.
I vote yes, Mr. Dashner,
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler,
Yes.
Mr. Tell,
Yes.
and Mr. Clark.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. We will now move on to our regular board meeting at this time. And our next item is item 7, public comments. If you were going to be calling in to do a public comment, now would be the time to do that. If you are on the phone, you need to press *6 to unmute yourself when it's your turn to speak. Our first public comment is from Brittany Kiernan, and she would like to speak regarding mask exemptions. Ms. Kiernan, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Oh, perfect. Go right ahead.
I was just curious if the board would consider doing a mask exemption similar to the immunization exemption that current students are allowed to get.
All right, thank you. We won't be having a discussion, but we will definitely have the district look into that. And if you'd like, we can get back to you with that.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, next up is Jim Mikola, and he has asked me to read his comment. It's rather lengthy here. Okay. Number 1, the South Lyon Schools Frequently Asked Question document should describe some of the steps that will not take place in the fall, just so parents are completely clear what their children will experience. At a minimum, the following should be mentioned. K-5 classroom students will not be required to wear masks. Students will not be spaced 6 feet apart. This applies to busing and classrooms for all grade levels. Parents will not be notified of COVID cases in a classroom unless their student was within 6 feet of the affected student for more than 15 minutes. Students' temperature screening will not be performed unless required by the county health department. Number 2, the Edgenuity Learning Platform has documented issues on the website, which he lists the website. Has the board taken these issues into consideration? For example, poor stability has caused students to be disconnected during exams, resulting in a failing grade. Number 3, the Edgenuity platform does not offer the following AP classes: chemistry, physics, macroeconomics, and microeconomics. Will there be an option for these classes for the virtual learning students if not taught by the South Lyon teachers online? Number 4, please make clear the expectations for reporting when someone is exposed to a known case outside of the school setting in addition to school exposure. Are they to self-quarantine for the 14 days as the school cases are? How would this even be verified? Number 5, cleaning of the desks after every class is not referenced in either the July 10th email or the 18th plan. Who is cleaning those desks after each class? Number 6, the June community survey is referenced in the frequently asked questions. I have the following concerns regarding the survey. The survey was completed with expectations similar to what was in place in June in the community, which includes masks and social distancing. Looser guidelines were provided afterwards in the Michigan Return to School Roadmap. It's not accurate to apply the June survey results as acceptance of the Michigan Return to School Roadmap. No follow-up survey was sent after the Michigan Return to School Roadmap was published. The survey did not allow for additional feedback. Only go, no-go checkboxes were provided. I think a new survey should be issued for more accurate feedback based upon the current South Lyon Frequently Asked Questions document. Okay, at this time, we do not have any additional public comments, but there will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting if you are interested. Okay, with that, we will move to item number 8, which is approval of agenda. Can I get a motion to approve our agenda as listed?
I'll move to approve the agenda this evening.
I'll
Support.
that.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy, approved by Ms. Ertel. Any questions or comments or changes to the approved agenda? The agenda. Okay. With that, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Tell,
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler,
Yes.
Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
I vote yes, Mr. Kennedy,
Yes.
and Ms. Hanshaw.
Motion passes 7-0. Next up is item 9, approval of minutes. We get a motion to approve the June 15th, 2020 minutes, which included the recognition of retirees and their meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes from the June 15th, 2020 meeting.
I'll second.
Moved by Mr. Schwegler, seconded by Mr. Kennedy. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Dashner,
Yes.
Ms. Hanshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
I vote yes, Mr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Tell,
Yes.
and Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 10, approval of bills.
I'll move to approve the June 2020 wires and ACH transactions and the June 2020 revenue report.
I'll support.
Moved by Mr. Dashner, supported by Mr. Clark. Any questions or comments on the bills? Okay, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Hanshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
I vote yes, Mr. Dashner,
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler,
Yes.
Mr. Tell,
Yes.
and Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 11 is the Oakland County Parent Advisory Committee representative.
Yes, Amanda Fitch has been recommended to serve as our Special Education Parent Advisory Committee, or PAC, representative. This item is being brought to you tonight for action since there is a PAC representative vacancy in South Lyon. And we recommend that you approve the Oakland County Parent Advisory Committee representative recommendation as presented.
Can I get a motion?
I will move to appoint Amanda Fitch as our, excuse me, as our Parent Advisory Committee representative.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy, supported by Ms. Ertel to approve Amanda Fitch as our PAC representative. Any questions or comments? I just want to say that I know Amanda very well, and she's a very hardworking parent that will do a phenomenal job for South Lyon. So I'm excited to have her taking this role. So, and thank you to her.
I appreciate her stepping up for it.
All right, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
All right, Mr. Schwegler,
Yes.
Mr. Tell,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Ms. Hanshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
I vote yes, and Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 12, acceptance of gifts.
All right, thank you, President Hanshaw, and hello, everybody. South Lyon Community Schools Food Service Department received the following monetary donation to be used to pay off the all student accounts for the entire district. That was by Community Choices, Sarah Malinowski, and that was in a total of $4,974.12. Both South Lyon High and South Lyon East High School received donations from Plant Moran for accounting textbooks, equaling over $13,000 in total. South Lyon High School also received 2 fabric Velcro display units for school display purposes. Angela England donated that, and that was valued at over $750 each. I would recommend that the gifts be accepted in accordance to policy 7003. And if you'd notice, that is a different policy with our policies changing. Just as a reminder that only those gifts over $500 now come before the board. So I just wanted to remind you of that with this new policy.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I will move to accept those 4 gifts with great thanks.
I will second
Support.
that, and I will
You got it, Mr. Abate.
Go ahead, Tony.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy, supported by Mr. Abate. Any questions or comments? Other than thank yous, tremendous thank yous to all of them. All right. With that, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
All right, Mr. Tell,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Ms. Henshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Dashner
Yes.
and Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 13, request for childcare leave.
Yes, Aaron Doty has requested a child care leave for the 2021 school year. This is a leave that's outlined in the SLEA contract, and I would recommend that we approve the request for a child care leave as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I will move to approve the childcare leave for Ms. Doty.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Abate, supported by Mr. Dashner. Any questions or comments regarding the request for childcare leave? Other than I'm glad that the school district is able to offer that for her. It's a great opportunity for her. So best of luck. With that, can we get a roll call, Mr. Abate?
Sure. I vote yes. Mr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. Henshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Tell,
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler,
Yes.
and Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 14, approval of board policy revisions.
Thank you. Luskin Albertson provided updates for our board policies. These updates were reviewed at the June 15, 2020 Board of Education meeting. There were no changes requested, and I would recommend that we approve the board policy revisions as recommended by Luskin Albertson.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the board policy revisions as recommended by Luskin Albertson.
I'll support.
Moved by Mr. Abate, supported by Mr. Schwegler. Any questions or comments regarding the policy revisions?
I think we have a spelling error on page 14 in the food deliveries. Be the 4th line down, last word in the line.
What is the word, Randy?
I think it's supposed to be policy may result in student discipline, and it says many result.
Okay, we'll take a look at that and certainly get that that change. Thank you.
Okay, do we need a new motion, or can we just?
Nah,
No?
have them fix
Okay.
it.
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments? Okay, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Henshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Dasher,
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler,
Yes.
Mr. Tell,
Yes.
and Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 15, technology device purchases.
Yes, today presented to the board was a request to purchase devices in accordance with the device purchasing schedule for Bond 2020 Series 1. These are the devices to address the one-to-one initiative for student devices. Due to the long delivery times, the timing of the bond election, and the school board meetings, we are requesting the board to review and approve at the July 20th, 2020 board meeting. Bids were received from the spring 2020 spot REMSI bid on April 14th, 2020 for the student devices. 8 bids were available on the spot REMSI competitive bid results. It is our recommendation that you award the purchases as follows pending Bond 2020 approval. Say Computer Products for 2,939 of the HP Chromebooks 11A G8 in the amount of $680,378.50 using Bond 2020 funds. The Sehi computer products for 1,180 of the HP Chromebooks X360 11G3EE in the amount of $309,455 using Bond 2020 funds. The Sehi computer products for 225 of the 14-inch HP ProBook 440 G7 with upgrade options in the amount of $119,830.50 using Bond 2020 funds. And from Sehi computer products for 711 of the HP Chromebooks 11A G8EE in the amount of $164,596.50 using the ESSER grant funds. Total device purchases total $1,274,260.50.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the technology purchases as outlined by Ms. Witt in her previous statement, and that we remove the requirement for the stipulation, the bond passing, and that this purchase be completed by the district regardless of the bond outcome.
I'll support.
Okay, moved by Mr. Clark, supported by Mr. Dashner, to approve the motion as read, removing the the use of Bond 2020 funds, and the district will purchase them regardless. Any additional questions or comments?
Can I make a comment?
Ms. Wood, go ahead and explain the reasoning, if you would.
Yep.
Well, I wouldn't say removing the Bond 2020 funds. I would say removing pending approval of Bond 2020. That way, if it passes, we're still able to use Bond 2020 funds to purchase them.
Right.
My motion stands amended.
Just for a little background, excuse me, the devices for students and staff, if we are to go in a remote setting, are not going to be delivered by the first day of school, even if we were to get them ordered tomorrow. So we don't want to postpone the ordering of the laptops until the bond approval, because that will just put the devices in our students' hands and our staff hands at an even later time. The devices are needed whether the bond approves or not. So we will have to go to the general fund operating budget to find the monies to pay for them. Because we may be in a situation where we're going from remote learning to in-person learning multiple times this year. We may be in complete remote learning on the first day of school, and we can't postpone the delivery of these devices any longer than we can. So there's a little bit of the background.
Right.
The other piece on top of it too is that we're ordering just over 5,000 computers, I think it is, that will allow us to put devices. It doesn't get us to one-to-one, but it'll be a lot less of students sharing devices if they're in school, which with the COVID stuff kind of changes that a little bit. But then as Stacy said, if we do end up having school get shut down in the midst of everything, then they've got devices they've been using that can be taken home. So it kind of helps with the uncertainty of things moving forward. And our experience from being shut down for the spring is that there was significant savings by doing that. So even if the bond doesn't pass, and we're out for a significant time, there should be general fund savings that could help offset the cost of the purchase.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'd like to add in there that with what we have on our inventory now, including these purchases, we would actually be able to hand devices to every single student, junior kindergarten to 12th grade. It wouldn't be sharing any devices. Everyone would be assigned a personal device.
Excellent. Okay. No other questions or comments? Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
All right, Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Taub.
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
And Ms. Fanshawe.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Item number 16, professional staff layoff.
All right, great job on that last motion. That's really exciting. As far as item number 16, the 2021 budget requires a reduction of staff. There were teaching positions that were identified, most of which were achieved through attrition or changes of placement of existing staff, which created openings for previously displaced staff. One middle school teacher was identified for a reduction and is not certified to teach in any existing vacancies. This professional staff member will need to be placed on layoff. I would recommend that we place middle school teacher Yenu Ward on layoff effective July 21, 2020.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'll approve, unfortunately, the professional staff layoff.
I'll support.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy, supported by Mr. Dashner. Any questions or comments?
I don't think our district has done this in as long as I've been in the district, which is close to 20 years. Obviously not something we like to do, but it's a necessity.
Mr. Kirby, if we don't lose as much money as we're anticipating, would this teacher be rehired, or would she's just being laid off, correct?
Correct. She's laid off, which would give her first rights to any vacancies in which she is certified for. This particular teacher, part of the reason that she's at the layoff position is because she only is certified to teach in one specific foreign language or world language. Does have the ability to do some other non-certifiable electives like keyboarding and things of that nature. So the middle school staff principals would need to create a schedule that would allow her to teach in order to bring her back, but she would have first rights of refusal, and she would have that for up to 2 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Let's hope.
Yeah. All right. If no other questions or comments, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
All right. I vote yes. Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Hanshaw.
Yes.
Mr. Tell.
Yes.
And Mr. Schwegler.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 17 is administration. Item up first is preparedness plan update. Mr. Archibald, Ms. Kudwa.
Good evening. Well, before we jump into the presentation, and I'm sure that the community is more interested in the presentation, and there are a few comments from me, but I would like the opportunity to provide a couple. One in that, in anticipation of the interest in tonight's overview, we have posted this presentation on the main page of the district website for individuals to reference. I want to acknowledge and thank the dozens of staff members who have been working so diligently over the past many weeks on the return to school plan for our district. The level of complexity involved in this work is just immense. And their thinking, their problem solving, and their planning has been that as well. I also want to acknowledge the many community members, not only who are joining us tonight, watching the live stream, but those who have shared their feedback, their insights, their questions over the past many weeks as we have considered those in our planning and going forward. It is very important, though, that we all understand that this has been and will continue to be an ever-evolving process. As much as we wish we could be here tonight and share with our community that we have a final stage plan, and here it is, I think most of us recognize that the circumstances that we're in are unprecedented and somewhat unpredictable. And I assure you that as a district, we're working very hard to wrap our heads and our minds and our hands around it and to put a comprehensive plan together in preparation for the start of the new school year. While there's much work to be done, we want to take the opportunity tonight to provide the board, our community, and our staff with an overview of where we are to date. And again, I stress that it is an overview and still in process. So I'll handle the first few slides and then turn it over to Mrs. Kudwa, who will take us most of the way home. Tonight's presentation, you've heard much about the Michigan Return to School Roadmap. We want to provide a little bit of background and context with regard to the roadmap. We'll also take a look at the requirements or what's outlined in the roadmap and provide some detail in terms of how our district meets the requirements or recommendations in the particular areas. The frequently asked question document was referenced earlier. That is available on the website, and like everything else, will continue to be refined and added to as we move along. The next slide, please. The Michigan Return to School Roadmap. As you know, Governor Whitmer created the COVID-19 Task Force on Education. This task force was comprised of staff members from the Michigan Department of Education and other state departments, public health experts, administrators, intermediate school district personnel, local school district personnel, parents, students, and many other community leaders. The task force published its Michigan 2021 Return to School Roadmap just at the end of June. On June 30th, it hit our websites and mailboxes. And that Safe Schools Roadmap was released in conjunction with Executive Order 2020-142, which explicitly names the requirements that are shared in that particular roadmap. And again, well, I'll move on. I think I covered this point again. So just looking at a few things about the roadmap, the governor introduced the Michigan Safe Start Plan, which is a 6-phase approach to reopening the state. The Safe Schools Roadmap lays out those requirements and recommendations for schools to reopen in the fall. It's important in phases 1 through 3, which are lumped together, that no in-person instruction can occur if, as a region, we are in phases 1 through 3. It is remote instruction only. In phase 4, which is the phase that our particular region, the Detroit region, is in currently, we may use in-person instruction. It's permitted with very stringent required safety protocols. In phase 5, again, schools are open for in-person instruction with a lessening or moderate required safety protocols. And lastly, the long-awaited phase 6, schools are open for instruction with minimal safety protocols. And again, the governor will determine which phase our particular region is in. At the moment, our region, which is region 1, is in phase 4. Next slide, please. The guiding principles, this is what the task force was considering as they work to inform and develop their roadmap. You heard a lot about this in the spring, but the first bullet being equitable access to learning is a right for all children. The next bullet is that in collaboration, we will prioritize our resources to best meet the needs for all children. We also talked in the spring a lot about the meaning and value of relationships, and that as educators, we will draw on those meaningful, valuable relationships to create a safe learning environment for each of our students. And lastly, what informed the roadmap work was giving students and parents voice in all aspects of learning and emotional support for families. We have learned perhaps no other time in education on the importance of recognizing where our folks are at emotionally, not just academically, and listening, and as an entire community, not just a school system, but as an entire community, responding to those needs. Next slide, please. The requirements and recommendations. The Michigan Safe Schools Roadmap lays out requirements and recommendations for each phase, each of the phases I mentioned previously, including safety protocols. That could be PPE, hygiene, spacing and movement, screening, etc. Mental and social emotional well-being, instruction, particularly safety protocols for in-person instruction, and lastly, operations, which is, again, access to our facilities, technology, food service, transportation, and alike. You will hear throughout the presentation and in much information to come the terms required protocols and strongly recommended or recommended. In the first bullet, it covers that safety protocols that are required. These are required by all Michigan schools serving students grades pre-K through 12, and all the required elements must be met in order to open school for in-person instruction in any of the phases 4, 5, or 6. The safety protocols that are strongly recommended or recommended are optional for schools, and they may choose to implement these safety protocols to minimize the spread of COVID-19. As a district, we will be developing a plan that will address all of the safety protocols, and we will also be evaluating all of the recommended and strongly recommended protocols that are feasible for implementation and include those in our plan as well. What we have left to do, just to lay out a little bit of a timeline. So we have from today until August 10th, we'll be back before the board to prepare to present our final plan for the board's approval. We have a lot of work to do between now and then, as I mentioned. The board, after final approval of the plan, we have to submit that plan to the intermediate school district by August 15th, in which case the intermediate school district forwards that plan on to the state, which would then be posted to our website. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the timeline in terms of final planning. Tonight's focus, as our region of the state is in phase 4, that's the focus of our presentation with regard to instruction. But what you'll get, again, is an overview of in-person instruction as it pertains to phase 4, an overview of fully virtual instruction in our under development virtual learning pathway, and remote instruction should we be in phases 1 through 3. And with that, I'll have one more slide with the general information. We have received questions regarding the first day of school. So it's important to just point out to folks that that has not changed from the previously established calendar. So students in grades 1 through 12, their first day of school will be Tuesday, September 8th. And our junior kindergarten and kindergarten will begin on Wednesday, September 9th, with more exciting information to follow. Families looking for information regarding our planning. If you're a current family enrolled in the district and receiving SkyAlerts, we will provide updates via the SkyAlert, as well as posting information on our website. If you're not registered, I would encourage you to do that. But all of our information, if you aren't receiving SkyAlerts, will also be available on the district website. And lastly, at this time, it is our plan to provide 5 full days a week for all in-person instruction in phase 4. It's important to know that this could still change prior to the start of the year. It will be here before we know it and feel like an awful long time, all at the same time. But again, there's still a lot of work to be done. I think our team is up to the task, and I will turn it over to Ms. Kugwa for the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. To review the steps our district is taking, it is helpful to break down the Safe Schools roadmap by each requirement for phase 4 and then share our district's response. In phase 4, with the requirements regarding masks, Facial coverings must be worn by staff except for meals. Our implementation plan calls for facial coverings to be worn, to be provided for staff members who are not providing their own. If a staff member chooses to bring their own, it may be homemade or disposable level 1 basic surgical grade masks. Homemade facial coverings must be washed daily, and disposable face coverings must be disposed of at the end of each day. Facial coverings must be worn by pre-K through 12 students, staff, and bus drivers during school transportation. And in our implementation, we call for all persons on one of our buses to be wearing a facial covering. Facial coverings must be worn in the hallways, common areas by pre-K students in the building, except for during meals. All persons in our hallways and common areas of the school must wear facial coverings. Facial coverings must be worn in classrooms by all students in grades 6 through 12. And our expectation is that all secondary students will be expected to wear a facial covering in classrooms and common spaces, except while eating lunch. The roadmap calls for all students in grades K through 5 to wear facial coverings unless the students remain with their class throughout the school day and do not come into close contact, which is considered less than 6 feet of distance, with students in another class. In our implementation plan, we call for facial coverings to be worn by preschool through grade 5 students outside of their classroom or in spaces where their class is not the only class present. Facial coverings are not required in junior kindergarten through 5th grade classrooms where only one class is present, but families can choose for their child to wear a facial covering in the classroom if that is the preference. Regarding student use of masks, students are encouraged to bring their own reusable mask from home and wash them daily when they return home. It's likely students will find the fit of their familiar mask more comfortable and effective. Families who have children that prefer their own reusable mask may wish for students to keep an extra mask in their backpack or in their elementary classroom in case the first mask becomes dirty or wet. If a student chooses to bring a disposable mask from home, it must be disposed of at the end of the day. Disposable masks cannot be reused over multiple days. In the event that students do not have a personal mask from home or misplace their mask during the course of the day, or their mask becomes dirty or wet, the school will have disposable masks available. Current practices we have received indicate that face shields may not be used in place of masks. If a student or a staff member wishes to wear a face shield, it would need to be in addition to the face mask, as long as the student or staff member is medically able to tolerate and remove a face mask. Some additional requirements regarding masks. Any student who is unable to medically tolerate a facial covering must not wear one. Any student who is incapacitated or unable to remove a facial covering without assistance must not wear one. That's what the roadmap calls for, and in our implementation, we ask that parents of students who are medically unable to wear a facial covering or unable to remove the facial covering on their own should provide their building administrator with a written correspondence stating this fact, along with any supporting documents that that family is willing to share. We also have requirements regarding hygiene. The roadmap calls for us to provide adequate supplies to support healthy hygiene behaviors. This includes soap, hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol, paper towel, tissues, and signs reinforcing hand washing techniques. We're also called to teach and reinforce hand washing with soap and water for at least 20 seconds and/or the safe use of hand sanitizer. In our implementation plan, supplies have been ordered to meet this requirement. Hand sanitizer will be available in each classroom and in common spaces throughout the schools. And videos regarding hand washing and sanitizer use will be shared out with families prior to the start of the school year and also shared repeatedly during the start of school. We also have some additional recommendations regarding this piece. We will be educating staff and students on how to cough and sneeze into their elbows or cover with a tissue. Soap and sanitizer stations will be systematically checked and refilled as part of our cleaning protocols. And time is being built into schedules to provide opportunities for hand washing. The use of shared supplies between students is being limited. Students' personal items will be kept separate and individually labeled and not with other students' materials. Phase 4 also calls for the schools to cooperate with local public health departments regarding implementation protocols for screening students and staff. Our implementation plan states that our district will follow the local county health department's requirements for implementing protocols for screening students and staff. Athletes and band and music participants and staff members at the high school level are currently using COVID screener questions, but are not required to have their temperatures taken on site. We have not received guidance yet from the health department on whether this must include daily temperature checks and screeners for our students. We are still awaiting that guidance. With regard to positive cases, the roadmap calls for all schools, both public and private, to cooperate with local public health departments if there's a confirmed case of COVID-19. And in particular, those schools must collect the contact information for any close contacts of the affected individual from 2 days before he or she showed symptoms to the last time that he or she was present at school. Our district will follow the local county health department's requirements for collecting and reporting contact information. And in the roadmap, it does state that close contacts are defined as those who spent more than 15 minutes, less than 6 feet in close proximity to the student or staff member who is identified as testing positive. And the roadmap further states that at this time, testing of all students or staff members in those classes is not recommended, and only those that develop symptoms require testing for COVID-19. In phase 4 of the roadmap, it states that it prohibits indoor assemblies that bring together students from more than one classroom. In our implementation, our plan is to prohibit assemblies during phase 4, although they may occur virtually and be shared with individual classes. The roadmap goes into some great detail regarding athletics in phase 4, and it is important to note that we are currently meeting those requirements for our summer athletic activities. Communication has already been shared with those students and their families regarding details of our response, and our athletic department will continue to provide details as we near the start of the fall athletic season. With regard to cleaning, the roadmap states frequently touched surfaces, including light switches, doors, benches, bathrooms, must undergo cleaning at least every 4 hours with either an EPA-approved disinfectant or a diluted bleach solution. Staff must wear gloves, surgical mask, and face shield when performing all cleaning activities. In our implementation, measures will be taken to reduce as many of these touch points as possible. During phase 4, restrooms will be cleaned every 4 hours, disinfecting all touch points such as light switches, doors, toilets, and sinks. Staff will be provided with the appropriate training and PPE to conduct cleaning routines. The roadmap states that in phase 4, libraries, computer labs, arts, and other hands-on classrooms must undergo cleaning after every class period with either the EPA-approved disinfectant or a diluted bleach solution. In our implementation, we note that some common spaces and buildings may be closed to students during phase 4. In those remaining common spaces that are in use, surfaces and materials that are used will be cleaned after each class period. Regarding cleaning, the roadmap states student desks must be wiped down with either EPA-approved disinfectant or diluted bleach solution after each class period. Playground structures must continue to undergo normal cleaning routines, but using an EPA-approved disinfectant is considered unnecessary. In our implementation plan, student desks will be cleaned after each class period. Playgrounds will continue to be cleaned and maintained as normal. And in addition, students will use hand sanitizer prior to and after recess. Regarding transportation, the roadmap calls for districts to require the use of hand sanitizer prior to entering the bus. Hand sanitizer must be supplied on the bus. As we stated before, the bus driver, staff, and all students in grades pre-K through 12 must wear facial coverings while on the bus. And there must be a routine to clean and disinfect the transportation vehicles before and after every transit route. In our implementation, we will have mounted hand sanitizer stations on every bus, and students will be required to use it as they enter. All persons on the bus must wear a facial covering, and buses are to be cleaned between routes. In addition, some other notes as far as what steps we are taking for transportation. Weather permitting, the windows will be open to increase circulation. Students will have an assigned bus seat in phase 4. Students will be seated with siblings or at the elementary level with others from their classroom. And students who exhibit symptoms of COVID during the school day will not be permitted to use buses to return home. The Southland Community Schools is also implementing a number of measures beyond the required measures. These include providing training for staff and students on proper hygiene related to sneezing and coughing, posting signs to remind students and staff of proper hygiene, strictly limiting family members and other guests in the buildings. At the elementary level, cohorting students within the school building to limit interactions between classrooms of students. So again, cohorting refers to keeping that classroom of students at the elementary level together for the entire day, and not having them interact with students from other classrooms. To the extent possible, strategically scheduling lunches, passing times, and recess to minimize the number of students in any common area, and to the extent possible, managing traffic flows to minimize congestion of large groups of students, and then significantly limiting shared supplies and cleaning any shared supplies between use. We are working to assign separate entry doors for drop-offs, buses, etc., when possible, to reduce the number of students who are entering through any one door in the mornings or exiting through any one door in the afternoons. Some additional measures in phase 4. Secondary students would not share lockers in phase 4 unless those students are from the same household. We would identify and designate a quarantine area and a staff person to care for students who become ill at school. There would be no offsite or overnight field trips taking place in phase 4. And at the secondary level, we are considering an alternative schedule that would allow students to continue to attend 5 days of instruction, but would reduce the number of classmates and teachers each student comes in contact with over the course of the day. We're taking some specific steps for our food safety, so I'd like to share those as well. The district food service department will still be offering breakfast and lunches to all of our students daily and at all grade levels. We would ask families, if you choose to pack your child's lunch, please consider the following, especially our elementary parents. Parents should consider packing things that are easy to open from their child's packed lunch to reduce the need for staff to have to assist in opening packages. This helps limit staff having to touch food items that children will be putting into their mouths. So an example of this might be if you're a parent and your child is using a Capri Sun, very rarely can they detach the straw and put the straw into the juice pouch on their own. Think about a staff member from the cafeteria who would be wearing gloves and mask, but would have to help your child do that, versus if your child had a water bottle that had a top they could open on their own that you had filled with juice at home. So one of those limits the amount of touch points on your child's lunch, one does not. We would just caution parents, especially at the elementary level, whose children may need assistance with lunch, to think through what types of things they're putting into lunch bags this year. Our cafeteria lunch choices will be limited while in phase 4 and will be served as a grab-and-go style lunch. Lunch trays will be completely prepackaged and have a wrap over them for students to pick up, and students would not be choosing individual items to place on their tray themselves. In phase 4, students would be assigned seats and socially distanced whenever lunch is taking place in the cafeteria. The lunch day would be extended in order to spread out across more lunches and reduce the number of students eating lunch at any one time. For elementary, in phase 4, it is recommended that students eat in their classroom if social distancing suggestions cannot be met. We do anticipate being able to have most elementary classes eat in their classrooms. However, we do have some students with significant food allergies. Their classes may still use the cafeteria, but may be one of only a handful of groups to do so. Time has been built into lunch to allow students to wash their hands before and after each meal. And recess would occur at a time separate from lunch, with only one classroom of students on a section of the playground at any one time. This would mean our elementary students would likely not be required to wear a mask during recess. Students would still be able to play outside, weather permitting. Regarding secondary lunch in phase 4, it's recommended that students eat in their classrooms if social distancing suggestions cannot be met. However, at the secondary level, increasing the number of lunch periods should hopefully allow us to meet those social distancing requirements or suggestions at lunch. If only a handful of classes may need to eat in classrooms, and time is also being added at the secondary schools for time before lunch for students to wash their hands prior to eating. Regarding social distancing, that maintaining a maximum of 6 feet is not possible in all areas. Staff members are working to maximize space between individuals in the classroom. We're taking steps like additional furniture being removed from classrooms to create more room to spread out desks. And for example, classes in science labs may use both lab tables and desks to increase the space between students. And desks in classrooms will all face the same direction. In phase 4, it's possible that group work will need to take place through virtual collaboration rather than students grouping desks together. Science labs in phase 4 may either be done virtually or shifted to a demonstration. And in phase 4, students will not share materials unless those materials are cleaned in between use. We're going to review a little bit about our phase 4 instructional models. In the community survey we sent in June, we had 5,125 responses, and we do have approximately 5,186 families in the district, so incredibly good response rates. Almost 80% of families who preferred some form of in-person instruction did prefer 5 full days of instruction. And the parent survey responses were one factor we used in the decision to offer the 5-day plan, but not the only factor. We had some parents ask about the hybrid model because in our initial communication, we did ask if we had to move to a hybrid model, would preference have been half days or full days? The requirements in the My Return to School roadmap regarding in-person instruction, along with conversation with other area districts, did influence our decision to offer 5 full days rather than a hybrid model. We also have a number of families who, for medical purposes, must have a fully virtual model. Since we are unable to add additional teaching staff due to the anticipated state budget reductions, and teachers will be providing in-person instruction to small cohorts each day in a hybrid model, virtual learning days in the hybrid model would have been fully asynchronous, meaning no teacher contact. This would have resulted in students receiving less overall instructional time with teachers, and that was a critical point that we considered as we made our decision. So our 2 instructional models that we are moving forward with for now for the fall are in-person instruction, 5 full days per week, implementing all of the safety measures previously mentioned, and current students would automatically be enrolled in this option unless the family communicates to us that they would like to be enrolled in the virtual learning pathway. Because we recognize that there are families that will need to be fully virtual for next school year, we have developed the South Lyon Community Schools virtual learning pathway. It is a 100% virtual learning model taught by a South Lyon Community Schools teacher using our curriculum in nearly all cases. So a little bit more about that virtual learning pathway. So we're using 2 different phrases here to describe things that are taking place. So in our district, we will be using the term remote learning to refer to that temporary shift that we all may need to do, moving to online learning when the classroom, school, or district is required to do so based on where we are in phases 1 through 3, or a directive from a local county health department. The virtual learning pathway, on the other hand, is what we're referring to as that planned full year shift for some students to online learning due to the family being uncomfortable with in-person instruction until the state of the pandemic has improved. And this is based on the preference and needs of the families. So families are opting into that virtual learning pathway if that is their preference. A little bit about what that looks like at each of the 3 levels. For our elementary students, it would be taught by South Lyon Community teachers using South Lyon Community Schools curriculum. It's designed to provide opportunities for students to build rapport and connections with their teacher and their classmates. So they would be part of a cohort of students. All of the classmates in their class would also be virtual learning pathway students. We are carefully balancing the amount of time that our elementary students are engaged in online learning while ensuring the program matches the rigor and pace of in-person classroom instruction. Time is built across the week for interventions and supports based on individual student needs. And time considerations for how long each chunk of the model lasts is based on the student grade level. Grading is consistent with our in-person instructional model, so families would expect the same type of report cards for our elementary virtual learning pathway that they receive for our in-person instruction. So some pieces that would be present in our elementary school virtual learning pathway are daily morning meeting, just like in person, daily workshop blocks, reading, writing, math, science, social studies, and they would be rotating throughout those subjects throughout the week. Daily read alouds, text talks, and math talks. There would be some asynchronous lessons with some independent activities for students to do, and built-in breaks for movement, lunch, play, and snacks. Our elementary students would still have a daily specials time with our art, music, and PE teachers, and there would be a weekly small group instructional component as well. For our middle school students, in nearly all cases, the lessons would be taught by our South Lyon Community Schools teachers using our curriculum. Students in the middle school would have assigned class periods for core classes and electives. Classes would meet live for portions of that class period, with the remaining time for independent work, group work, and small groups meeting with their teacher. Student assignments and assessments are graded and a semester letter grade is given, just like our in-person instruction. Middle school students in the fully virtual model may need to make some new elective choices. Some elective courses may be adjusted to run with multiple grades of students. For example, we may offer an art elective to both 7th and 8th grade students. There's enough students to fill that section. We may not have enough students in the virtual program to run each of our current middle school electives in a virtual setting. And also some of our middle school electives aren't a great fit for a virtual model. We will make sure there are elective options for our middle school virtual learning pathway students that they will enjoy. So we will make sure that there are some interesting and creative things that they can be doing in their virtual learning pathway. For our high school learners, just like our middle school students, they would have assigned class periods for each of their 6 courses. Classes taught by our teachers would meet live for portions of the class period, with the remaining time of each class period set aside for independent work, small group work, and small groups meeting with the teacher. When possible, our own staff member would teach virtual sections of content. Student assessments and assignments would be graded and a semester letter grade would be given, just like in-person instruction. When the number of interested students does not allow us to assign our own teacher to a course, we would utilize high-quality online courses with a Michigan certified instructor through Edgenuity to ensure our virtual program high school students are progressing toward meeting diploma requirements. We are currently using Edgenuity now. We are using it with some of our high school students and have had good success with that program. There would be advanced and advanced placement courses available, and we would work with individual high school students who are enrolled in the virtual learning pathway to revise their course requests regarding electives and their 4-year academic plan as needed. School assignments for students in the virtual learning pathway. Students would remain part of their current school community. So students would still be able to virtually participate in assemblies and spirit days. They would be able to make a choice to attend in-person events like school dances for graduation. They would be able to order spirit wear. They can appear in the yearbook, all of those things that our in-person students can do. Staying connected with the school and our teachers helps to make that transition back to in-person instruction easier for families later on. When possible, in the virtual learning model, we will keep our virtual learners from the same schools together when we do virtual classroom placements to help them maintain those connections to classmates. So for example, if we are running 2 sections of virtual 3rd grade, we would keep students from Pearson in one section, students from Bartlett in another. So they may be with 2 or 3 other schools, but they would be together with some friends that they know from previous years in those elementary schools, and then hopefully able to return back to in-person instruction with those same friends later on. Students are still able to participate in most extracurricular activities, such as sports and clubs, if they're enrolled in our virtual program. Some of our co-curricular activities may not be feasible, so we're going to work with teachers to figure out what can you work on after school or before school that still can be done virtually. So some of the advisors for clubs are saying it may be possible for them to have students virtually participate, or students may choose to come in. Some things aren't going to be a great fit to that, however. Some things like school dances and graduation ceremonies are the choice for the student and the family. Would they like to choose to attend those things? They are not required to. We did have questions from our community about changing learning pathways. Families can make the switch at the semester for middle school and high school, or at the end of 1st or 2nd trimester for elementary. If the state of the pandemic were to change sooner, we would revisit those timelines. It is important that those virtual classrooms have an opportunity to build their classroom community. So moving students in and out of that class would be detrimental to the development of their community. And so changes in or out of the virtual classrooms will be made at natural breaks in the year unless there are extenuating circumstances. Enrollment in the virtual learning pathway is free for Southline Community Schools families, and if needed, a Chromebook and an internet hotspot would be provided to those students selecting the fully virtual school program. Most of the specialized services would be provided to students in a fully virtual model through virtual meetings. Services would be provided during combined learning sessions, small groups, or individually. Families who are interested in the virtual learning pathway should complete the virtual learning interest form that was emailed to families so we can begin staffing those programs. Students would benefit from a supportive adult at home who's able to help them remain on track. What happens if our region returns to remote learning? So we just discussed virtual learning pathway. Remote learning is when we are called to pull our students back to remote learning who were previously in in-person instruction. So again, that remote learning is based on information we have been given by the health officials. It includes our region potentially returning to phases 1 through 3. And it's important to note that our spring plan was an emergency response plan. Both the virtual learning pathway and our remote instructional plan call for regular live lessons with staff, graded assignments, and our normal level of rigor and depth. Students must participate in order to be counted as attending school in both the virtual and in the remote plan. And a remote learning plan will share many of the same structures as our virtual learning pathway. As we noted earlier tonight, we do not currently have enough devices to provide one to each student with a dedicated device. In the event that we need to transition to fully remote learning, we are prepared to provide families with Chromebooks on an as-needed basis, similar to the distribution that took place during the school shutdown. However, that pending August 4th bond proposal does include technology purchase that would allow the district to provide each student with a dedicated Chromebook beginning sometime in the first semester of the 2021 school year. And as those of you that joined the board meeting earlier tonight heard, that purchase was approved regardless of whether the bond outcome. So those purchases will be made very shortly. What questions do you have for us?
And if I can, Lisa, if you don't mind, just let give everyone a moment to catch their breath and consider their questions. I want to take the opportunity to thank Lisa, Stacy, Chester, Sue, Kristen, Kelly. That's for some of you who didn't think I could name some of the cabinet or administrators. And as well as our steering committee, our back to school steering committee, and many of the other staff for the work that has gone into this point, as well as in preparing tonight's presentation. And again, we intended it to be a very high level overview with some detail where we can. We fully recognize that this is a stressful time and situation for every single person involved, whether you're a board member, a staff member, a parent in the community, or a student. But it's important that, again, we continue to be patient and allow us to pull together and finalize these plans. Again, we recognize the more finality we have to plans, the more comfortable people may become, and we're working to get there. So again, that was a high-level overview, and hopefully it's given you a few minutes to catch your breath, and maybe you have a couple questions. And I'm not going to be naive enough to think that the silence means anything, but that is truly a lot of information to digest. And as well as for our 300 plus viewers who are watching. So
yeah, does anyone have any questions or comments right now? Or I just want to say thank you first off, because that was a very thorough presentation in a very short amount of time with not a lot of information given to you. So I feel that is a good start for parents. We have a couple of public comments already popping up. So, there will be some comments at the end, but so far I think this is a very good plan myself. So Mr. Schwegler, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm already getting text messages about it too from people watching. So, and to be upfront, it's because my kids are part of the magnet program, but it extends beyond that. I do wonder for those that are in more of those special eds, maybe it's special ed, and I saw the part in there where there will be some support provided for those who choose to do virtual. But is there any more detail you can share about how programs like magnet or special ed, should they choose virtual options, kind of get that specified learning or that specific type of learning that they're getting in person, should they choose to do the virtual? Are they just, how is that going to be done?
So Dan, part of that is going to be based on for special education. We're working through that on an IEP basis. So we'll be figuring out what that looks like for individual students. It's difficult for me to answer that across an entire district because depending on who the student is and what their needs are, it's going to look different child by child. When we're talking about other programs like Magnet, we're working through some of all of those decisions still. So what we've shared tonight are the decisions that have tentatively been made. Some things are still in the works and some things are dependent on the interest. So are there 10 magnet students interested in something or one? So we'll work through as we take a look at those family interest surveys and the forms families are filling out and then who chooses to enroll. But not all of the decisions have been made yet.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can just add there, an important piece as we're working through this is, as everybody recognizes, is so much more than realizing just the what we want to do. So as we identify the what, prior to being able to communicate things out to the board or to the community, we need to be very confident as a district in terms of how it is that we're going to be able to do what it is we're saying to do. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and communicate that this is what we're going to do without having a firm plan in place to be able to implement it. So
I just wanted to say thank you as well. It's very thorough, and it's a lot to put together considering how many uncertainties are still out there. So thanks for doing that. I did get a couple questions also, and they kind of folks are floating some questions around about Kids Club, and I don't know if that's something that you guys have spent too much time delving into. I know we've sort of been carrying on as sort of quote as typical with that. Will those continue, and just with added safety precautions in place? That's what people have been sending my way.
At this time, our understanding is that Kids Club will continue to occur in phase 4, just with additional safety protocols, just like in-person instruction.
Great, thank you.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse or get too deep into the weeds of the how things will happen. But I was asked, who and how are the classrooms going to be cleaned, and desks between each class at the secondary level? When kids are changing classes, is that going to be up to the teachers to clean their desks and everything else in their room that the kids have put their grubby fingers on? or do we have, how much of that burden is on the teachers and how much of that is going to be on our support staff and our custodians to do that? And if you don't know yet, I'm fine with that.
We don't have it finalized yet. I can tell you quite honestly, the idea of cleaning the desks between each class period is a major piece that we have to work through. And knowing the limited amount of time that we have and what needs to get done, we're of the mind that needs to be a shared responsibility, or I'll leave it at that. And we're working to again, be creative with a schedule that might possibly limit the number of transitions we have in a day in terms of between class periods. But that is one of many big questions that we need to resolve very soon, and we're working on it.
Good enough. I appreciate that.
I just want to say thank you for all the work that's been done so far. I know there's a lot of people working on it. I thought the FAQ was put together fairly well. I'm sure there's a ton more questions out there, but reading through the document, preparing for the meeting, most of the questions that came my way from people were answered in it. So I know you hit the target with at least some of the questions out there. And we'll be waiting for more as things get developed.
Anybody else?
I don't know if you can answer this yet. It was another question about if there is already a date that has been set for folks to decide, or is that going to come after the next meeting?
We have not set the final decision date yet.
Okay. So there's plenty of time to kind of let this play out a little bit before we all have to panic into a choice.
I would encourage parents, there is the interest form. If they are feeling that they are on the fence between the two models, we would encourage them to fill that out. When you're in the interest form, you have two options. You are confident that this is what your family will need to do. Many of our families who know they have a medical condition of one family member and know that they cannot return for in-person instruction have already made that selection. Regardless of the intricacies of the plan, they know that's what their family will need for next year. If you are on the fence, there is an option to kind of pick that as well too, but it does help us significantly with our planning if we know about how many students we are planning for.
All right. Again, thank you very much. A lot of effort from a lot of people, and we appreciate it. Next up is legislation. Mr. Archibald, anything new?
I have nothing to report on that one, but it did make me chuckle.
Okay, board committee reports. Mr. Clark, legislative on our end?
There has, hold on here. Sorry about that. There has not been a legislative committee meeting since our last meeting, so I really have nothing new to report.
I had one comment. It wasn't, I don't know that it counts as legislative. but the Oakland County School Board Association has created a diversity and equity committee just for the whole county. So we'll see where that goes. If anyone's interested in joining that, let me know. Okay, next up, policy. I don't think we've met since the last policy revisions. Finance.
We did have a finance committee meeting today. Part of that was a discussion of the computer purchase that we approved earlier tonight. Also discussed some of the projected cuts and new information out of Lansing with cuts from the 1920 school year. And Stacy or Mr. Archibald can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically there was going to be a cut for the 1920 year, but then they're offsetting that with CARES Act money in order to replace it. So there isn't a cut per se from last year, but we still don't have any information for the 2021 school year as far as the budget's concerned.
Yeah, I'll just update or elaborate on that a little bit. There's been an agreement at the state that there's going to be $175 per pupil cut in the 1920 school year, and $325 or $350 per pupil in addition of federal CARES revenue to be used in the 1920 school year and the 2021 school year. However, none of that has been finalized. That's just the latest that we hear that has not been passed by legislation yet. We have not heard any talk about what's coming for the 2021 per pupil funding at all. There's not been anything said, so.
Okay. Anything else with finance, Mr. Dasher?
Nope.
Okay. Facilities and grounds.
We have not had a meeting.
Okay.
Nope.
Curriculum and communications.
We have not had a meeting. Our next one will be August 6th.
Okay. Item D is other. Mr. Archibald, do we have any others?
I do not.
All right. Item 18 is reports. Do we have an update on the Southline Educational Foundation, Mr. Abate?
Yeah, last meeting, the conversation revolved largely around how the foundation board, foundation itself could continue to support the bond initiative upcoming. So I don't know where they stand at the moment, but I shared some contact information to connect them with the Citizens Committee. And so there's I think there's some conversation has been had between those two groups about how to go about supporting one another. So that was where we left off.
Okay, great, thank you. Item 19 is public comments, and we have currently 13. So if you would like to add to the list, I would sign up now. We will start with Mr. Dan Rector, and he is not planning on speaking, but he says, thank you for hearing my comments. My question, why are K-5 not required to wear masks during the class when the K-12 are required? Understanding it's somewhat subjective, smaller children tend to have less of a focus and proper avoidance of touching the face, picking their noses, etc. My sense is that this is not the best interest of the children, their parents, and keeping a community spread to a minimum. Using the most caution within reason, we will help us move past these restricted times, and my hope is we'd be doing everything we can to mitigate any possibility of spread within reason, of course. This policy has a direct impact on my decision to return my children to school in the first trimester, maybe even longer depending on how it's going. My sense is I can't be the only one worried about that particular policy. Requiring masks for K-5 seems like a good idea, maybe even a better idea for K-5 than even the 6th through 12th grade students, due to the maturity and more self-awareness as it pertains to personal hygiene habits, which is critical to avoid community spread. I'm curious into why that decision was made, and I ask the board to further evaluate their decision on that particular policy item. Thank you for considering my thoughts. Next up is Ms. Jennifer Gomori, and she is planning on calling in to speak on school learning questions. Ms. Gomori?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I just had a question about the students that are unable to wear masks. I was wondering if there's going to be a doctor note required for that? And then when they're in school, are they going to be kept more of a 6-foot distance from other students, given the fact that they are not wearing masks?
Right. Thank you. We will, that's similar to the question we had at the beginning of the meeting, so we'll make sure that that's added to our frequently asked questions.
Okay, I missed the beginning of the meeting. Sorry about that. And then,
Oh, that's okay. We didn't
since
offer
I missed the beginning, I just have
either.
one more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Blow dryers in the bathroom. Are you guys going to continue to do that, or are you going to go with more maybe a paper towel type thing because the whole circulation of the air factor?
All right. I'm not sure, but we will add that to our list of questions that we need to answer. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is Miss Elena Kavalauskas. Sorry, I didn't say it very well. And she has asked me to say, per an email I received back from the district, class sizes will remain similar to last year. I struggle to understand how this is safe for both teachers and students. I would also like to know what the plan is when a student or entire class is required to quarantine. Will the students immediately move to an online forum to ensure there is not a lag in their learning? Next up is Miss Sabrina Van Dam, and she states, for the online classes, will the grades be recorded as normal? What will happen for the elective high school classes, and how will these be recorded for a grade so the students stay up to date with class? How will the regular testing take place and be graded? Mr. John Thompson states, resident school of choice. You speak about how the students' emotional wellness and safety in terms of allowing to distance. However, resident school of choice students that selected Pearson Elementary 3rd grade have been forced back to their home schools. First, this does not align with supporting the emotional wellness of our children, who will have to attend an unfamiliar school with unfamiliar staff that will now be in facial coverings. In addition, we understand now that the Pearson 3rd grade classes will have 28 to 30 children. Why are you increasing class sizes when we should be lowering them to provide for distancing? It seems this particular decision does not align with your back-to-school roadmap. Next up is Miss Dawn Mifsud, and she states, number 1, can you please outline the exact protocol for when a child tests positive for COVID? Number 2, please outline the exact protocol for when a teacher tests positive for COVID, paid/unpaid/use of sick days. Number 3, if a teacher or student comes in contact with someone who tests positive, will there be a mandated quarantine period? When teachers take a day off for the numerous other reasons than COVID, who will sub, especially since subs are hard to get prior to COVID? Number 5, guest teachers are all in numerous schools and classrooms a week. If a substitute tests positive, do all the schools they've been in shut down for 2 weeks? Number 6, will there be temperature checks at all? If so, will midday temp checks for those kids that potentially took Tylenol in the morning? Number 7, what is the punishment when the masks come off, and who is going to mandate that? Number 8, who will monitor or how will bathrooms be monitored for social distancing? Number 9, are teachers getting hazard pay? Number 10, what will the structure of online learning look like? All day instruction, 8 hours, or log in independently for video instruction? Will online learning have independent teachers, or will it be video of a classroom in attendance? Number 12, if school is in the classroom, will teachers be mandated to use online while in the classroom in order for everyone to be acclimated? And number 13, do students have to be present for online instruction, or can it be viewed at their convenience? That's a good questions. Next up is Mr. Dan Rector, and he is a Kent Lake parent. He states, are there plans to staff up on janitors/building staff considering the increased workload with the updated cleaning requirements? If not, what is the board's plan to ensure the cleaning is done and properly staffed? Does that budget exist today for hiring help in the private sector if it cannot be met by increasing staff? Does the board think it's possible to meet these guidelines with the existing headcount? Miss Ellen Harrington represents World Languages, and she states, I would like to know what the plan is for the Chinese program, since there are only 2 teachers and one of them is being laid off. Will the one single remaining teacher be expected to teach at all 4 schools? Is the program being cut? If not, what is the plan? Mr. Chris Campo states, thank you for the endless hours and dedication for this plan to get our kids in school and the option for those who want virtual. Absolutely incredible. Ms. Patty Miles states, COVID return to school plan. Is there any consideration to utilizing outdoor space for class? Mr. Dan Bird states, understand that health department will provide guidance, but do you have bookend idea of response with positive COVID in students, teachers, admin? 1 kid, 10 kids, 50 kids are tested positive, etc. Could this lead to back and forth, in-person, remote, etc.? Thank you for all the work you've done to date. Michelle O'Donnell states, what if a student has cold allergy symptoms? Would they have to take a COVID test before returning to school? Why say hay fever, vomiting are the only symptoms where you couldn't go to school? Coughs and congestion are also COVID symptoms. Miss Lisa Porter states, what happens if someone is diagnosed with COVID? Will the class have to stop for 2 weeks? And Mr. John Nicola represents the high school and states, could you give more detail as to the reason for and what the alternative schedule would look like? And currently that is our last public comment. Thank you very much for all those comments. I'm sure the district will work hard for answers on all of them. Next up is item 20, correspondence. We have a long list, we have the list of our teacher tenure status. We have a number of teachers that have reached tenure. Congratulations to them. We have a couple of resignations, Mr. Ben Kirby, Ms. Maureen Newkirch, and Ms. Christina Covington. We have 1 retirement from Ms. Cheryl Carrick. We have the reduction of our hourly staff, all of our media monitors at all of our elementary schools. And we have the 1 layoff of a department manager. Item 21 is our meeting dates. And we're up to item 22, which is board comments. Mr. Schwegler? Sorry, you're the top of my board.
Wonderful. I guess I'll start off by thanking those who are being involved in these meetings, because there's a lot of great questions that were brought up in the comments that I'm actually looking forward to hearing some of the answers to as well. With that said, thank you to everybody who's put in the time to put this plan together. I know it's not a final plan, but it certainly is a good start to get that dialogue going that we need to make sure we have the right plan in place by fall. Thanks to those who have served the district and are planning to part ways, and specifically good luck to Ben as he starts his next chapter as superintendent. I wish him well. And I just wanted to finish with reminding people, it's a very short time. Actually, I had to remind myself to go get my absentee ballot because on August 4th, we will actually be gone that day. But to support the bond, it's going to really help to kind of ease a lot of the pressures, or some of the pressures that we're going to face financially this year. And there's a lot of great items in that bond. So just wanted to remind people to give their support for the bond on August 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Yes, thank you, President Hanshaw. I'd like to first start off by noticing that we had over 250 viewers on the YouTube this evening. And for all those dedicated residents who chose to watch, I'd like to remind them that tomorrow at 4 o'clock is the deadline for the filing if you're interested in pursuing a position on the school board. Present time, we only have, I believe, 1 person who has actually filed paperwork for 4 seats. So we do need people who are interested in doing that. I want to wish well to Mr. Kirby as he launches his next chapter. And other than that, I think I'm all set.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ertel.
Yes, I just want to reiterate that all the work and effort put into the plan so far is represented. There was, I think, a lot of information in what was presented to us. Yes, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I think, over the next few weeks, I'm sure it will be discussed and decided upon, and more questions will pop up as you start thinking about different items. Congratulations to Ben Kirby. Good luck in your next endeavor. And yes, please support the bond. If you were here at the beginning of the meeting, you saw that there's $1.2 million worth of computers that need to be purchased, and that's something that we would prefer not to come out of the general fund. So if we can get that to come out of bond dollars, that frees up us needing to find another $1.2 million to save out of general funds that could be used for other instructional items. So please support the bond. There's a lot of great things in it that's going to help students across the district. And enjoy more summer.
Thank you. Mr. Abate.
Yes, thank you. So again, I'll thank everyone who's been involved in putting together these plans, especially in such an uncertain time. I think it's gone really well so far. I appreciate also the public, the questions that came out, particularly at the end of the meeting. Those are very good. Those questions carry a lot of weight. And we know that we'll be spending a lot of time having discussions and nailing down each and every one of those so that folks can feel comfortable about their choices come this fall. I noticed in the, in our agenda, we had a layoff, we had some staff reductions and things. And I just want to reiterate what we've said before, that nobody in the district wants to be in a position to have to enact those things and to see people have their careers put on hold and have their livelihood affected. Please continue to speak with your legislators to push for support for schools so we can get ourselves back in a position where these things don't need to happen, where these things can be corrected, hopefully, going forward. Please continue, everybody, to do your part to slow the pandemic. It's the only way that we're going to ever get back to normal. Please, and we're going to do our best to help kids get through that this fall, including masks. They're not political. They just make sense. They're common sense. So please wear them when you're out there. We thank you for that. We're excited about the commencement activities this weekend. I'm really glad that we're going to be able to do something for our graduating seniors. I love the indoor events that we typically do, but this will be really good. I appreciate the high school administrators and the staff and all the folks involved in putting that together. I haven't talked to my colleagues yet about how best to be and everywhere at once, but I'm assuming we'll have to kind of pick a spot. So I think I'm going to be headed to East, which is the future homeschool of my students and of our neighborhood. So I'll likely spend my time there unless there's a good plan, folks, for switching back and forth. I don't know if there is at the moment, but that will be really good. And Mr. Kirby, Mr. Archibald, what a time to become superintendents, huh? If you can navigate this, the rest of your tenure should be pretty smooth. Mr. Kirby, congratulations to you. I'm sure you'll be successful there. They'll be very happy with your leadership. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dashner.
I'll echo the comments to Mr. Kirby. I wish you luck, Ben. I hope everything goes well for you, and hopefully this COVID storm blows over and you can get to normal leadership there. But thanks for your service with us. The bond, I do want to say and encourage everyone, supporting that's very important to a lot of different areas of our school. I mean, we talked about technology tonight, which is a big thing, but there's a lot of places on our buildings and our properties that they need work. We need roofs repaired. We need mechanical equipment replaced. A lot of things like that we just don't want to have to take general fund money out from. The other thing I wanted to mention, this is a little different, but our board meetings have been online. And I know with talking about going back to school, there's probably the thought that us being online board meetings doesn't bode well for being in-person school. But one of the reasons I like having these virtual board meetings is that it allows us to share with the community a lot better than our typical board meetings, just because of the technology challenges we have in the room. So, bear with us, even though we're doing this. I like that more of the community gets to watch our meetings. And then for the COVID plan, I do appreciate all the work that's been put in by the district. I appreciate the patience by the parents and the community that's out there. You know, we're dealing with a moving target, doing the best we can with what we have, and getting more details as we go along, and we'll get there. I'm sure there'll be some bumps in the road, but we'll figure it out and we'll get there. And the one last thing I wanted to mention in relation to the COVID plan and some of the questions that came through was things like class sizes. With COVID, we're kind of in a perfect storm that here we are facing some pretty large budget cuts by the state at the same time where we have these recommendations that we do more for the students. So it's very hard for us to social distance classrooms and add teachers to reduce class sizes when they're also cutting our budget, and our budget is mostly staff. And that's why we did the layoffs we did, was because of the cuts that are coming. So the only way to get smaller class sizes is more funding, and we can't make more funding happen. That has to come from the Michigan legislature. So, you know, if that's something you feel strongly about, contact your legislatures and tell them that schools need more funding. And with that, I will yield to the next person.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Ms. Hanshaw, Mr. Dashner, and my colleagues. I can't possibly have anything more to add that hasn't already been said, which kind of makes my comments easy. Mr. Kirby, once again, thank you for your dedication, your upfrontness, your guidance, and doing darn it the best job that I think anybody could do in your position. I've appreciated working with you, and our loss is Lake Orion's gain. Good luck to you. I'm sure you'll be fine over in Lake Orion. We appreciate it. To our 250, 300 or so fellows in the community that have tuned in and listened to this meeting, thank you for your support. We appreciate your questions. I don't know if all communities around us have such passionate and tuned in parents and community that pay attention and are as involved. We do appreciate that. Thanks to my colleagues and Mr. Archibald and the committees who've worked on putting this plan together. I beg of our community to be patient. We aim to get this right the first time. Will it be perfect? No, but it looks very in-depth. It looks very good. Other than huge thanks to you all, I have nothing more.
All right, thank you. I'm going to start off my comment with, actually, we had one public comment pop in after I ended public comment, and so I'm just going to read it real quickly. It's Miss Evelyn Krieger, and she states that she is a teacher at South Lyon East High School, and she would like to know what the district's plan is for when a teacher catches COVID. Will they be expected to use their sick days for the quarantine? And what will happen with the teachers' classes? Will they be then quarantined as well? So I wanted to add that real quick. For my own comments, I wanted to reiterate what Mr. Dashner said about the online meetings. Because of the current situation, MASB has recommended that we actually have to be online while we are in the state of emergency. So as long as the state of emergency is going on, we have to have the online board meetings. But like he also stated, there are some huge advantages of people being able to watch these live streamed. And hopefully when we get back to live meetings, we can figure out a way to live stream those as well. Mr. Kirby, congratulations. You've done some amazing work in South Lyon, and I know our entire COVID response wouldn't have been the same without your leadership. So we definitely appreciate all you've done for South Lyon, and look forward to seeing the great things you do in Lake Orion.
Thank you, Gary.
Mm-hmm. Also, the interest form for whether or not folks want the online or in-person learning. If you are on the fence or are considering it, it would definitely help the district in planning if you let us know. So I highly recommend you review that. If you think you know or you're kind of on the fence, I would recommend checking that out. And lastly, bond support. Like everyone has said, we need as much dollars in the classroom as possible, and bond would definitely help us with that. So please support it, as well as go onto our Facebook page and share it. We have yard signs, we have signs you can put in your windows. You can even write support the bond in chalk and take a picture and post it on our Facebook page. So anything we can do to get the word out would definitely help. So With that, I will take a motion to adjourn for the night.
I'll move to adjourn.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy, supported by Ms. Ertel. Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
Sure, Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Tell,
Yes.
Mr. Schwegler,
Yes.
Mr. Dashner.
Yes.
I vote yes, Mr. Kennedy,
Yes.
and Ms. Anshaw.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. We are adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Stay well.
Mr. Kirby.
You too.
Bye. Thanks.